So I'm going to walk you through my new patient registration form, which is something that you want to have as a private practice owner. And this is something that you would want to send to your patients before you meet with them, or have them fill out. If you're seeing patients in person, you might have them fill it out in the waiting room, but ideally, you want this ahead of time. So when I first started my practice, I did not have an EMR. I created this template basically in a Word document, and then I would email to all of my patients this Word document. They would download it, fill it out, send it back to me, or some of them would fax it once I got my fax number set up. It was something that I just created in like a Word doc, which is something you can do if you don't have an EMR just yet. And then if you're storing patient files, you can store them on like an encrypted flash drive, or if you have like a HIPAA compliant version of Google Drive, for example, you could store it there. And then if you have hard copies, you could just use like a filing cabinet. But this was a form that I created to make sure that I had all of the information that I would need for not just to have an understanding before I met with the patient as to what they might be interested in, but also to make sure I had everything on file for insurance billing as well. So I currently use Simple Practice for my EMR. So what you see here is actually just like a PDF export of my new patient registration form. So once I had a couple of patients in the practice, I ended up switching to an EMR. And the one that I use is Simple Practice, which is actually, I've had some experience with a couple of different EMRs over the years, and I really like the way that Simple Practice is. I like the way that it is structured and the functionality that it has. And there is, if you're interested in giving it a try, there is a referral link in the description. And if you end up signing up, we both get 1 month for free, $150 credit. So just another perk, but it is a product that I recommend, and that just comes with use over the years and really enjoying the functionality. So with Simple Practice, you can create form templates. They have some standardized ones in their settings where you can use some pre-built forms, but what you're looking at here is my new patient registration form that I created in Simple Practice, and this is just a PDF export. So when new patients are onboarded into the practice, they get a welcome email that has a link to their patient portal, and it's got all of the different paperwork that they would fill out. So this is one of the forms, and this is again a PDF, so a new patient would just be able to type into the document and it would send directly back to me, and there's no need for them to print anything out. So a few things with this form. I have just a section, patient background, and a spot for them to type in their full name. Another section here where they indicate their current occupation and employer. And these are just kind of like open text boxes. So some people give me lots of information, and other times it's just a couple of words. There's a section here about marital status, and then a section for them to include their family physician information. So full name, practice, and phone number. I will say sometimes I get the practice name or the physician name, but not the phone number. So that's something that you might want to just make sure that you follow up with your patients about. So one thing that I've done over the years is kind of decrease the amount of documents that I'm sending to patients. So I used to have separate documents for consent to connect with their physician or with any other healthcare providers. And now I actually have a section built on this intake form where they are going to indicate which healthcare providers they would like me to speak with. So I just have a blurb here about how I can't discuss their protected health information with anyone unless they authorize me to do so. And then I have a section down here where I am saying that they can check off which of these different individuals they would like me to communicate with for care. Now, once they check off one of these boxes, so if they clicked primary doctor, another field would show up where they would enter in the physician information. And then they can also check off none, that they would prefer to have no information be released. The next section of this form is their health history. So I have here, please list any medical illnesses, problems, or diagnoses and provide details. I used to have this as like a checkbox section where they can check off like heart disease or high blood pressure, which is definitely something that you can do, but I would find that people would check things off, and then if something didn't fit on the list, they wouldn't type it into the other section. I will also say that more often than not, I'll have patients underreport what different medical illnesses that they might have. And so I've had patients recently just write cardiovascular disease, and then in that first appointment, I find that they have, fatty liver disease, or they also have prediabetes. So while you can certainly build out this form to have check boxes and required fields, you still want to follow up in that first patient appointment just to confirm the diagnoses that they do have, and then also get further information from them. The next section section here I have is listing all medications. And then I have a section where they also list any supplements. And again, these are two sections that I also clarify in that new patient appointment, but it's really helpful for them to be able to kind of put in this information ahead of time. And sometimes I'll find that if I see a certain medication and it's maybe a blood pressure medication, but they haven't indicated that they have high blood pressure, I'll ask about it. Because sometimes I'll have patients indicate that they're taking a medication for, let's say, high blood pressure, but not consider themselves to have that condition anymore because it's managed. So again, just making sure that you clarify if you see a medication on there for a condition that's not listed in the medical diagnosis field. The next section of this form I have is related to weight and height. And now this is going to be important because I do need to calculate their BMI, because that's something that I will generally use for billing if, a code like Z71.3, which is just dietary counseling and surveillance, if that code is not something that is accepted by insurance, I want to make sure that I have their weight on file to be able to calculate their BMI. The next section of this form, I have nutrition and wellness assessment. So what's your main reason for seeing a dietitian? And this is just a really helpful section for me to be able to understand, what they're coming to see me for. If they've worked with a dietitian in the past, and in these boxes here, if they click yes, another field will show up. So if you are creating this in, let's say, Google Docs or a Word document, you might want to indicate a section where they could fill in information about the dietitian that they met with previously and how long ago that was. That's also going to be important for insurance purposes, because if they already met with a dietitian this calendar year, they may have less visits than I'm anticipating them to have. The next section here is the indication of their history with tobacco use and then also alcohol use. And I have here again these different boxes that they would check off. If they indicate that they currently smoke, another field would show up where they would indicate how much that they smoke. If they've smoked in the past, another field shows up where they can indicate how long ago they quit. And then the same with alcohol use, they could check off these boxes and another field shows up where they are able to input more information for me. The next section I have here is the allergies and intolerances. So same thing, if they check off yes, another field populates where they can type in the information as to what they might be allergic to. If, again, you're creating this in a Word doc, I would suggest having a section where they can fill in more information, just so you have this background about the patient. The last couple sections here, I have a space where they can describe their physical activity, and same thing, another section shows up where they can indicate more details once they check off if they exercise maybe 1 to 3 days per week. And then this last piece is just some additional information. So I'm curious, how they heard about the practice. And I will say most individuals either come from their doctor or the insurance. So those are the two most common sources. And then I have a nutrition newsletter that I send out usually quarterly, sometimes less than that just based on time frame. And so they could check off if they'd like to be added to the newsletter, and then they can indicate their email address in the field that shows up. And the last bit of this form is just that they are consenting that all of the information in this form has been completed to the best of their ability. And something that's very important is that they have read, understood, and agreed to the items that are contained in this document. And there's a spot where they can do a digital signature. So they would sign their name, and then they would also type in their name, and then that would get attached to this form that I would get electronically. So when I first started my practice, I again had a template that I used that was created in a Word document, and it had a lot of information on it. When I started using an EMR and I started using Simple Practice, I kind of separated some of the forms out just for some clarity. And one of the sections in Simple Practice is a demographics form. So this is just basically pulled from my EMR. And this is the demographics information that's going to be collected from any new patient that I have. Now, some of this does overlap with that new patient form. So like their first and last name, there's a section on their new patient form that I just showed you that has them type in their name. So there's some places where they're indicating the same information twice, but this actually embeds the information in my EMR, which makes it a lot easier when we go to file claims, because their name, their their phone number, and then also their information, like their address. All of that is embedded in the portal. So it makes it a lot easier to then generate a claim and send that off to the insurance company without having to manually enter in any information. So you'll see here, legal first and last name, the name that they want to go by. So that's something I would definitely suggest, is making sure that you have a section on your forms to indicate which kind of preferred name they would like to go by, their email address. Now, with this demographics form in particular, again, the one that I have in Simple Practice, there are checkboxes for them to consent to messages through email, phone, and then also voicemail, or to indicate that they are not consenting to that. And it actually shows up right in the EMR in the patient profile, so I can see if they're consenting to email or text message, or if not, there's like a red line through it. This is something that you can embed on your new patient form, or you can also create a separate form that has just the consent document that has the information about if they're going to consent to email, text, or voicemail. The next piece of this form includes information about their address. So this is something that's required for insurance purposes. And all of these are required fields that are in this demographics form. Also on file would be their birth date, which is again something that I need for insurance purposes, their sex, and then also their gender identity. So this includes, they could type in information like their preferred pronouns, their relationship status and their employment status. And then the last piece of this is their emergency contact. And this is going to be really important, especially for telehealth, because I'm not with the patient in person. So if something goes wrong, I really need to have an emergency contact on file. So this indicates not just their name, but also email address and a phone number, so I can connect with them if needed.